Now, it should be broadcasting, okay? So, guys in the chat, let us know. Can you see us? Can you see Metatron's lovely, handsome face and my ugly mug? All right. And they are giving us the thumbs up. We are live. Welcome, everyone, to this very special event. Not only is it a special event, it is high time, all right? It's taken too long for this to happen. A live stream chat between me and the Metatron. Are you hyped? I'm hyped. This is exciting, okay? And, of course, I'm here with the Metatron. Sir?
Yes, hello, everyone, and Shad, thanks ever so for this opportunity. It's going to be fun.
An absolute pleasure. So, as by the title of this live stream might have alerted you, this is going to be a casual yet candid kind of discussion between two very awesome things, okay? Chivalry and Bushido. Of course, Metatron, he knows a lot more about Bushido than me, and I know a little bit about chivalry. And so we're going to talk, about that, some of the misconceptions, but also a bit of a comparison, okay? So I can see the chat alive and active. That's awesome. It's going to go too fast for us to be able to see. So the chat is mainly there for you guys to interact, but Super Chat should be enabled. Now, in regards to the Super Chat, Metatron and myself, we are going to answer some of the Super Chat at the end, if we can, because there should be a catalog of the Super Chat throughout the stream, and so we're going to try and look them up. We're not going to be able to answer them all, and if something fails at the end, we apologize. So basically, if you do want to do a Super Chat, that's not a guarantee that we'll be able to answer your question. So consider it a very generous donation, which it very much is. We thank you for that, but it's not a guarantee we'll be able to answer your question. So like I said, we'll try, and we'll try our best. But with all that technical jargon out of the way, let's get right into it. And I think the best place to start us off will be a brief summary. So Metatron, if you could give us a brief summary of Bushido, sir.
Okay, Bushido. It's simply put, Bushido is a code of conduct, a code of honor. And I'll get back to the meaning of that word because I think it's central to this discussion. And it's basically the ethics of the warrior caste, okay? Because of course that has to do with the Bushi, the warrior, the samurai. That's what I would say Bushido is.
So when you say ethics of the warrior caste, that is very interesting to me, because I'm always going to be approaching this from kind of a comparison from chivalry. And before I kind of jump on that comment about the ethics thing, I really should give a very brief summary of chivalry. Now, for you guys who want a more detailed explanation of these things, I'm sure Metatron has a video about Bushido on your channel, your YouTube channel.
Possibly, maybe I don't actually. I will make it. How about that?
Well, that's a good kickoff. I have a video on I have a video on chivalry that you can look up. But fundamentally, chivalry can be very misunderstood. But if you really summarize it, chivalry is the qualities that a knight has that makes him a good knight or good at his job. And so whatever someone thought made a knight good at his job, which can be somewhat subjective and sometimes contradictory to what other people in societies thought, that was chivalry to them, which kind of brings us to the ethics kind of discussion. When you say the ethics of the samurai, that's what I'm wondering about. Did those ethics sometimes contradict other interpretations of Bushido? Was it different, or was it more standardly understood across the board?
That is a very interesting question, because here is the thing. Bushido has had an organic growth through centuries, okay? So if you think about it now, we have a very different concept of ethics and morality than we did 100 years back in the same city, in the same country.
My
so
goodness.
Imagine, right?
Oh, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
No, please do.
You touch on that's a subject I've been thinking about heaps lately, and I'm kind of working my way up to do a full video on comparative morality and ethics, and what was good and just for someone in the past compared to now. And so I just really like that point that you mentioned. Sorry, just to...
No worries. Absolutely. So basically, you do have these ideas, these concepts, but they are a cornucopia of ideas, meaning that there is so much variety. When you look at, for example, 15th century, 16th century, and I know that the word Bushido didn't exist back then, but that doesn't mean that the code didn't exist. It existed. In fact, if we look at, there are some examples, I'm not going to give a date now, but there are some examples that mention Mononofu no Michi, so the way of the warrior. It's basically the same concept. So it existed in the 16th century, but it's going to be different from what you would have in the 18th century, for example. So a full-on Sengoku Jidai samurai would have some concepts and some be different to what would be understood both in modern times and in Edo Jidai, if you will.
That's interesting. So with the period of the samurai heyday, was Bushido a bit different to where it began and it kind of developed a bit more and could be different towards the end of the samurai?
Yeah, I would say that you can say that Bushido is different at every generation, to be honest. So, and even sometimes in some geographical areas, there might be variation. Now, there hasn't been done a deep and organic study of this, but I would imagine that in some isolated areas of Japan in ancient times, maybe I shouldn't say ancient times, but in feudal times, they might have a different understanding of, perhaps slightly different understanding of what is proper, what is correct for a bushi, because again, it's a social class. So it's not just a matter of that's what the soldiers do, that's what the warriors do, but it's what the class of samurai are expected to do. Okay.
That's very interesting. And what's really standing out to me is the parallels already between Bushido and chivalry, because with chivalry, very much it was a subjective thing that also evolved and changed. As to how much, well, we can't know definitively, but we do know it was subjective and changed. So just like how you said, it might have changed between generations. That's very much the case with chivalry as well. And as to the specific elements of the code of chivalry and the code of Bushido and stuff, I think we'll be able to ease our way into that by going right to the beginning, because as I consider how these codes develop, because we're on two separate sides of the world, right? And yet two very comparable and similar codes developed independently, that's very intriguing, but we can kind of figure it out through just looking at the warrior code, the basic warrior code that any society that has soldiers, an army and stuff like that, there are certain basic qualities that I've come to learn that is very positive and good for you to instill in your soldiers. Two big ones, bravery, courage. You don't want them to retreat unless you order them to. And the next one, loyalty. Loyalty. Those two fundamental qualities. And those seems to, like, chivalry, with all the different interpretations of chivalry, those two qualities seem to be one of the almost, if I think about it, I might be able to find other qualities that were consistent between them, but at least those two in my mind at the moment are consistent through every single version of chivalry when chivalry even came about as a concept. Is that the same with Bushido?
Well, it is loosely analogous, meaning that there are some areas that are very similar, and even in a way, sometimes even the influence of religion and philosophies into the code that also is present because later versions of Bushido are very much influenced by Confucianism, Buddhism, Shinto, etc. But definitely what you were saying, loyalty and courage to death and even self-sacrifice in a way, these are not only present in Bushido, but they're even present in the military codes of the ancient Romans. And I think it's not strange, because these are essential qualities for an effective combatant.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. And it's funny, you touched on something that I think will lead us into a significant difference between chivalry and Bushido when you said until death, and that's going to go into the concept of seppuku. But we're not there yet. I want to kind of bring us back a bit to the Genesis time, because the chivalry, one of the big kind of distinctions is that the first concept of chivalry actually wasn't a warrior code, because chivalry, it comes from the word chevalier, which is a horseman. And so essentially, chivalry is like the companion word in the same way that carpentry is the companion word for carpenter. And so chivalry is the companion word for chevalier, which is horseman. And so if you go to the root meaning of chivalry, it means horsemanship, just being able to ride a horse well. But when the role of the knight started to expand, where you needed to be more than just a good horseman to be a good, knight. You need to have all these other positive qualities that made you good at your job. Chivalry started to take in those qualities as well. And of course, the two fundamental ones that I mentioned before, loyalty and courage, came in. And then so many other kind of qualities came in depending on society. Also, the type of person, well, when I say type of person, what I mean, what a person wanted their knights to, or how a person wanted their knights to act. It started to become almost, when I look at it, it almost seems like a type of coercion, control, to make sure these, top tier class warriors stay in line and do what you want them to do. Is that, does that seem, is that similar with Bushido? Was it a form of control in some ways as well?
I would say absolutely, no, not even a shade of a doubt. And the thing is, when you were like before, you were asking me whether there are contradictions sometimes, and I would say yes, because the thing is, and this actually leads us back to what we mean by the word code of honor. Okay, so the real question, I think the fundamental question is, what is honor? How do we define honor? Because in the moment I say, if someone asks me, were the samurai honorable, I would say yes. But the problem is that when we say honorable, well, that word now, okay, is permeated by our modern culture and the expectations we have of the meaning of honorable, right? In fact, the other day I was actually taking part to a martial arts lesson, and one of the things one of the sensei said was, well, a samurai would never cut you or attack you from the back, and that's bull. Okay, that is what, absolutely not. If you have a daimyo, which is a feudal lord, and your daimyo is telling you, kill that man, okay, you've got, let's say you've got 4 samurai and a 5th samurai who belongs to an opposing faction, and for whatever reason there is a quarrel, and your lord says, kill him, kire in Japanese, it means literally cut him. You know, all 5 samurai draw their sword and cut him into pieces.
No fair play there.
No fair play at all. Why? Because for a samurai, being honorable, prestige to his lord first and to himself as a result of that. Okay, so sometimes the way to achieve that might sound wrong from a current modern perspective, but not in the 16th century Japan. Okay, an era of violence and life to death combat, and it's a very different situation, I believe. And so yeah, I think that's that.
Well, when you said loyalty to their lord and also their own code, this is kind of maybe a comparable difference, because with chivalry, when it started to become more understood as the concept of chivalry, as we would kind of understand it as the qualities that made a knight really good at his job, there started to become a disconnect between social classes in how they viewed chivalry. And so for the lord, very much was about loyalty. You do what I say. When I command you, you do what I say. But for the peasantry class, they didn't necessarily want a knight that did everything the lord said. They wanted a knight that would protect them no matter what, you know, the knight in shining armor. And yet for the clergy, they didn't necessarily want the knights to do everything, you know, to help the peasantry. They wanted the knights to be obedient to God's commandments, which meant the church, no matter what, you know. And so in all these different social classes, you have these different priorities of chivalry being pushed. And then you have like literature being produced, trying to say, this is what chivalry is. But what they're really saying is, this is what chivalry is according to me. And I'm writing this with the hopes to encourage knights to act in the way that I want them to act. And so you have this kind of disconnect in medieval literature between the writings of, say, Chrétien de Troyes, who he wrote a lot of like chivalric romances in the day, and his view of chivalry was very much like the Lady Fair, but also a lot of other weird stuff with him as well. But then you have, was it Geoffrey de Carney? It might have been, or Raymond Lull, one of those two guys. One of them was a member of the clergy as well, and he wrote a more idealized version of chivalry and things like that. And so it starts to be different. And is that the same with Bushido, or was Bushido more strictly dictated by the lords and the peasant?
Okay, we do need to underline that the peasant enjoyed a certain importance in the social class. Okay, so peasants were very important, but of course the bushi class is superior to that. Okay, and we do have literature on the code of honor in Japan as well. The most famous, I think, The Soul of Japan, Bushido, The Soul of Japan, by Nito Beinazo, and which was written in the 1900s. But of course, that book, I'd like to underline, it was first written in English, I believe in Pennsylvania, but don't quote me on that. But anyways, it was translated into Japanese many years after. So some people think that that man invented Bushido. Absolutely not true. He just wrote it down. Okay. But again, as you say, he wrote it down according to his own perspective. But I think definitely it is about control. But I would say that the ruling class, the daimyo or even the shogun, depending on the era, they were the ones that controlled. Yeah, peasants were important, whatever you want, but you have to consider this. And I think this is one of the gruesome parts. Yes, the samurai part of Bushido was self-control. Okay, it was integrity, it was sincerity, and yes, a samurai would not lie. Okay, that is what probably some did, of course.
Is that okay? So it wasn't universal, but that was kind of a common ideal, or that was
common ideal. Yeah, yeah, definitely. But again, let's say that you have got a group of samurai. Okay, and one thing that a samurai should not do, and I would imagine also in Sengoku Jidai, is killing innocent people for fun or killing innocent people for stealing money. Okay, you don't do that. However, let's say you've got a civilian innocent house in the middle of nowhere, but it's in the way, and your daimyo tells you burn it to the ground. The samurai burn it to the ground, but now they're killing innocent people. It doesn't matter because they're doing it for their lord. So you see how things change, and I would say definitely the ruling class, as you know, has the last word on it.
See, a really interesting comparison between Japan and Europe is in regards to how sieges were concluded in the medieval period, when an army would. And what's interesting about this, can you apply the concepts of chivalry to a whole army? Well, yes and no. It kind of depends, because the army is comprised somewhat of knights. The lords leading the army will usually be knights in their own right, and if they wouldn't kind of call themselves a knight as the highest station. They would be, no, I'm a count or a duke, but they're still knights on the side. And so because of that, they still have this chivalric ideal that they try and adhere to. And so when, you need to take this city or castle, before a siege happens, they'll have this parley between the two.
Yes.
And the besieging force will usually say something to this effect: surrender now, save us the trouble of having to do all the work to take the city. Okay, and we'll let everyone go free. We won't kill a single soul, but only if you surrender now. If you don't surrender now, things are going to start to get really ugly. And the interesting thing about that threat, the threat will have no weight at all unless you follow through with it and actually, actually do something with it. And then, the siege happens, and sometimes they're repelled because the defenders, they might not want to surrender because they might think they have good chances of repelling the attackers, which sometimes they did. So it was a big gamble. But if they weren't able to fight off the attackers and the besiegers took the city, sometimes it can be 50 or not 50-50, but sometimes they were let free, but more often than not, like wholesale slaughter if that ultimatum was given. And these are knights who are supposed to defend the helpless and weak and stuff like that. And as peasant, innocent people in the city. Because that was the case when the Crusaders took Jerusalem in the first crusade. As soon as they took that city, they just slaughter right throughout the whole thing.
Bloodbath,
but that wasn't necessarily them being particularly nasty against the Middle East or whatever. That was just kind of almost a common practice with you resisted us, and because you forced us to commit our forces, and you also, we lost lives because of your stubbornness. This is your punishment. And I think they could have almost seen it as a type of just righteous punishment.
Yeah, there you go. Perspective of that century, as I was saying.
Yeah. And so that's the interesting thing, where people think of the concept of honor and nobility, and that's usually associated with righteousness. But when you try and look at it in context, you can see how a lot of actions that we would think are pretty darn vicious were considered honorable. even in these concepts. So my next question there, moving, because you already started to touch on some of these things. What are some of the bigger misconceptions about Bushido in the modern day?
Okay, yeah, as I say, I think some of the things have been pushed to represent some ideals that we have in our day and age. For example, if you've got a samurai, okay, and it's belonging to the opponent, to your opponent, to the foe, okay, and he's running away. All right, and he has dropped his weapon, so he's weaponless. Okay, he's running away. You reach him, you kill him, no problem. So you have killed a person who is not wielding a weapon, no problem for him. It's not frowned upon. But on the other hand, a similar action really depends. Sometimes I think there is also this misunderstanding of the shinobi, okay, the ninja, the shinobi no mono, and the samurai, and how some things the shinobi no mono would do, the samurai wouldn't. That is true, unless the samurai is a shinobi no mono, but we're going to get a bit complicated. Sometimes the line is a bit blurry. But let's say you've got, okay, a shinobi no mono, and you say a shinobi no mono, for example, would lie, and a samurai would rather not, if possible. True, being cheating and that sort of thing. But a shinobi no mono, would a shinobi no mono kill you from behind if needed? Yes. Would a samurai do it? Absolutely. So here is the thing. It depends. You need a lot of context. Quoting Matt Easton, you need a heck of a lot of context to understand, right, whether something would be considered honorable or not. And again, it all goes back to, am I bringing wealth, land, and power to my lord? If the answer is yes, I am being honorable.
Awesome. For chivalry, if I was to try and say what the biggest misconception about chivalry is, I've already kind of answered it, but I'll just rephrase it in a more direct way. And it's that people think that chivalry was an actual code with a list of specific things. A knight does this, a knight doesn't do that, a knight will always do this, and a knight will always do that. When it was actually a far more fluid thing. When it was just the things that made a knight good at his job. And if a knight did something particularly impressive and achieved that goal and showed him that he was a pretty good knight, people would say he is very chivalrous. That is a chivalrous knight. And indeed, if he did something that that someone liked and conformed to how they viewed chivalry. So if a noble lady thought that a knight should always be courteous to the women and stuff like that, and a knight was courteous, she would say, well, he is very chivalrous. But there are some actions that a knight would do where one person would say that's chivalrous and another person would say it's not chivalrous because of those differences. And that ultimately comes back to what I was saying. There was never this codified list of specific things. But what's interesting is most of the items on the list that you see in the codes of chivalry and stuff like that were incorporated in someone's view of chivalry in the past. So it's not wholly incorrect. It's just understanding that kind of context.
Yes, to jump in on that, how you said the concept of the word chivalry might change. The word is the same, but the expectations you have differ depending on your own morality, where you're from, when you are from, right? And it's a similar thing. I had a discussion on translation once at university, and we were trying to translate the word kami. The kami is normally translated as God. Now, I personally don't like that translation because for the Shinto perspective, for example, yes, you have gods that are anthropomorphic, so they look like, humans. For example, Izanami and Izanagi. But you also have the spirit that resides in a tree can be a kami, and the force of nature can be a kami. So if you translate kami as God, then Western people will always imagine it as an anthropomorphic entity, because that's what we are used to think, right? Whereas I think it would be better to translate it as spirit or spirit of nature, force, whatever. So again, similar situation, honor, what do we expect? Code or ethics, according to what? It's very difficult to see these things without the matrix of filters that we have now in our own understanding. Very difficult thing to do.
Yeah, that honestly seems to be kind of like the thing you have to work to overcome, where the more if you want to understand, because it's funny. I don't really consider myself a historian. I'm not too much into
I mean, me
dates.
neither.
Yeah, I'm into things. So the big three things for me is swords, castles, and knights. And so I want to know about them, the why, and the what, which leads me to learning about dates here and there. But the more I endeavor to try and understand it, the more I realize I have to take away the construct of the modern world I have in my head of morality, ethics, combats, also just the things that make people happy on so many levels, to try and get a more accurate understanding of what things really were like and how things were done.
Yeah, you just reminded me of one thing, actually, talking about how some things have been romanticized. Okay. For example, I read once in a forum, and I did mention this on one of my videos, one guy who was saying the samurai would never use, for example, firearms because that would be dishonorable. Yeah, go tell that to Oda Nobunaga. He frigging mass-produced the things, when he got it from the Portuguese, matchlock type arquebus. Because think about it, you are in a time of war. Okay, you've got loads of Sengoku Jidai. You've got loads of daimyo. They're raising armies and they're killing each other. Okay, constantly. And you think the moment you can get your hands into an actual tactical advantage, you're gonna say no because that's not right. Sometimes we just romanticize it and dehumanize it. These are humans. They want to go back home, right? That's the thing.
Well, this is kind of leading me into another question, and how seriously do you because it's hard to, you can't really know definitively, but what impression do you receive when you look at Bushido as to how seriously the samurai adhered to it? If it was a choice between death or and following Bushido, or if they broke one of the dictates of Bushido and they could save their own lives or get some other gain out of it, what choice would they more generally pick?
It's a very interesting question, and I would like to answer this way. Look at it this way. Is the samurai an honorable guy? Answer. Well, the samurai is a guy, first and foremost. Is it a good guy? Is it a bad guy? It depends individually on the person. I'm sure there were people who adhered to it to the letter, and probably even all the way back to the Nara period, possibly, or even before, Heian period. Were there people who got away with it because nobody was watching? Absolutely, I'm sure. I mean, it's like you have got good cops and bad cops. You've got good soldiers and bad soldiers, good teachers and bad teachers. So I would say that to a certain extent, I would say a lot of samurai adhered to the code because they had to. Okay, because think about this: if the code wasn't strict, you couldn't control them, as you said, and I think a similar thing for the knights. But a knight, so mounted, and a samurai are warriors who have access to training into the best weapons that technology can give you, can provide. So these guys are dangerous. Okay, you are training them. They are war machines in both scenarios. Okay, and you need to control them. So I'm sure that the rules and the codes were incredibly strict, and of course, sometimes the concept of seppuku, so killing yourself to not only regain the honor you have lost, but actually die with more honor than you had in the first place. I would imagine it was enforced. You don't do it, I'm going to slaughter your entire family. So you do it.
Now, seppuku is a really interesting concept that I have tried to understand for a long time, and I have this kind of a description that explains it. I could be completely wrong, so correct me on the way
I'm often wrong, so some people point out justifiably. No problem.
Likewise. This is how I've kind of tried to understand, because I've often wondered, how does killing yourself give you honor or regain lost honor? Because there is another way to look at it, to think that's completely stupid. Or you could actually try and live and correct the mistake you did, actually contribute something more that if you kill yourself, you can't do that anymore. It's not there. And so how does killing yourself regain honor? And I had this thought that seemed to make sense. So I'll throw it by you, where Bushido, one of the ways to look at it seems to be this concept of holding honor and loyalty in higher regard than your own life. These are the things that you dedicate your life towards, where that saying where what is it? The essence of Bushido is realized in death. Is that the
Yeah,
saying?
yeah, that's a saying. Yeah.
It's where embracing one's own death and being ready to die at any moment. And I tried to understand that. And I wondered, is that concept in translation meaning that they are ready to die to show that they hold these ideals more important than their own life? And
absolutely.
And then if they break this code, supposedly, where people say you don't have honor and you don't hold these ideals greater than your own life, it seems like the ultimate comeback to that accusation is like, really? You think I don't hold these ideals greater than my own life? Give me a knife and I'll show you.
It's an interesting point of view. Here's the thing. Bushido is a way to temper a violent life with serenity. And I know that that's going to sound strange considering the fact cutting yourself, but please consider this thing. Seppuku or harakiri, it was used in two ways mostly: to restore honor when you really messed up, not a little thing, something serious. Okay, like for example, drawing your sword when you were in the palace in the presence of your lord. You don't do that. Okay, like it happened, for example, in the with the legend of the 47 Ronin. It's a famous one. There is this daimyo who does this. He got mad, he got pissed off at another daimyo. He got really mad, drew the sword, attacked him, and then he had to commit seppuku. I actually lived in that town, Ako, interestingly enough, in Japan. But anyways, this is one thing. The second thing is also a way to sentence someone to death. So sometimes a daimyo wanted to sentence someone to death, but since he was a samurai, do it through seppuku. So not all seppuku is a matter of honor. Sometimes it's a sentence to death. Okay, so how, like you were saying, instead of cutting yourself, can't you do something else? Probably, I would imagine, that's just my opinion, that when seppuku existed, you were in a situation where this person is very dangerous, as we have established, and he's not under our control, so he needs to be removed. And it's a very Japanese. So of course, it's going to look strange through our eyes, but yeah, and also remember, the reason why you kill yourself in a incredibly painful way is because you show it's a deed of courage. That's also that. There is also that.
See, it's interesting because as I try and scan, the vague amount of knowledge that I've collected about chivalry, knights, medieval period in my head, it's hard for me to think of the answer as to what happened to a knight when they grossly violated the concept of chivalry. And at this point in time, I actually can't think of any direct answers. So that there's something I'll, be able to do further research on, because nothing really much is coming to mind. Like I can think of things, just state punishment. When someone does something bad, they are executed or they put on trial and stuff like that. Because what's interesting, there seems to be a lack of representation in the concept of chivalry in judicial proceedings. Yet chivalry appears in literature as a very firm concept that people understood, yet it wasn't incorporated into law, to my understanding at the moment. If anyone can correct me on that, I'd love to know. One of the other examples that I heard in a university, not a university, but a lecture on the subject, was that chivalry wasn't necessarily incorporated into law, but certain aspects were added to help promote chivalric ideals, like the tournament scene and stuff like that. They, when they first started, they seemed to be pretty darn crazy and chaotic, and people were dying fairly easily and stuff. And they realized that we need to make some more conservative rules here, so people don't kill each other so easily and stuff like that. And the comparison was that type of restraint of when you fight, you show restraint upon yourself, is similar to one version of a way of looking at chivalry, which is kind of funny because that actually contradicts another type of chivalry, which is to when someone gives you the slightest offense or gives you any slight at all, you react, and you don't let
same for the samurai. Same for the samurai.
You do not let them slight your honor in any way. You are a knight. And so what's amazing about that is so contradictory to this other ideal of chivalry of restraint and mercy.
Mhm.
which was also promoted. So those are two classic contradictory ideals.
And sorry to interrupt you, but there is a similar thing in Bushido. You've got the
Mhm.
concept of compassion. You've got the concept of compassion. But again, the same samurai who show compassion, and I'm sure sometimes some did, is the same guy who during a battle is going to remove your head. Okay, so not much compassion there. So again, this is why I say, are we talking about the period of peace? Are we talking then where concepts like the soul of the samurai resides in his sword? That's beautiful and all, but that's something that you can develop during a period of peace. During a period of war, things are going to be much more practical because people need to go back home, okay, and they need to win battles.
Exactly. That's what I've found as well. That when it comes to large scale warfare and stuff like that, I have not yet come across any accounts where someone says, no, we should do this because this is the chivalric way to do. No, whenever I'm looking at medieval warfare, it's we need to do this because this will make us or help us win and help us kill the guys we're trying to fight. That was
Oh yeah,
always
yeah.
the priority. Like
Hmm.
defeating the enemy and in terms of defeating them the right or honorable way, that kind of came second. Like we'll
Yeah.
deal with that. If we need to deal with it, let's focus
Mhm.
on not getting killed.
Yes, also because history is written by the victor. So
Absolutely.
most likely you can also change some things and perhaps a lot of this is why I think, again, I'm not a historian, but I think it's important when you look at history to look at it with an open mind, so that
Mhm.
new discoveries might show a completely different thing, and you need to be ready to abandon old ideas you had if they are replaced by new data, whether it be
Mhm.
archaeological or whether it be iconographic, um, because again, some of the things are what people want us to think.
Yeah. And I think one of the places where the concept of, always showing mercy on your enemy actually didn't necessarily arise due to chivalry, but arose out of
Mm.
the general practice of ransom in the medieval period.
Oh yeah,
And,
absolutely.
getting money. And people thought, and when people saw, hey, this guy showed mercy on him, that must be because he wanted to show mercy. And they didn't realize, no, it's because he wanted to ransom and get money for a result. But that was a very chivalric thing. That must be a kind of an idea of chivalry. But was ransom a thing in medieval Japan and the samurai and stuff?
I don't. Yeah, I'm not actually sure about ransom. One thing I'm sure of is that during a battle, if you manage to kill off an officer or someone important, a noble, then that would gain you a lot of money. It could gain you land. It can gain you power. So, and as you know, I mean, that was often represented by the head.
I
So you would
found
bring
that
the head.
that's real. That's like the polar opposite. It's like, and it's so interesting the perspective there, where in medieval Europe, the guys with the money, they have a high chance of living. Yeah, in medieval Japan, the guys with the money and position, they're the targets. Kill it because I want to get.
Oh yeah, yeah. If you see someone, and often they would make themselves recognizable. They would have these very elaborate helmets, and one of the two samurai sets I have is actually an officer set because it has very massive, maedate, so the decoration on the helmet. Oh yeah. In fact, the samurai loved to stand out on the battlefield because if you stand out, if you are rich and you can show off with your armor. Of course, when we reach Edo period, then this goes to an extreme, obviously. But even in Sengoku Jidai, you want to be able to be recognizable because you want your lord to notice you. And this is
Ah,
something, right?
mm,
But of course, it also has the problem that your opponent will also recognize you. So it's one of those things. But I think it's a bit of a risk that they were willing to take.
yeah.
It's one of those things.
It's funny that like there are so many similarities, yet
Mm.
there are key kind of differences within those similarities. But gee, we've had a great discussion so far. As we're wrapping up, are there any other distinct differences that you can think
Mhm.
of between chivalry and Bushido?
I think distinctive difference is the unit, the soldier, the warrior that we are talking about, because if we extend the concept of knights, which happens a lot, to men at arms as well, which look exactly like knights depending on how wealthy they were,
Mhm.
then of course I think there can be more similarities between the samurai and the knights. But if we mean now knights as mounted nobility, then some knights could be similar to what a daimyo actually is, because you might have a count, you might have a duke, even during the Battle of Agincourt, and the French there got the frigging aristocracy in the front, okay, all in full plate armor. But those wouldn't really be samurai, maybe they would be more similar to a daimyo, possibly, depending on what. And I think that's also one of the reasons why you were mentioning before, it's difficult to think of a knight in shining armor that does something unchivalrous and then gets killed because of it. Well, of course, because if it's a duke, you don't just cut the head of a duke, just like you know.
That's the thing. The higher you are in the noble kind of ladder, you get to determine what's chivalrous and what's not. And it's basically whatever the hell I feel like doing. And and of course, it's hard to put our morality, on them. But it does seem like there were, some rulers really did do their best to do good according to how they understood it. But what's amazing, that this is where I get a bit, stuck in the mud, because trying to look at historical figures, there are accounts of, say, Richard the Lionheart or Henry V or whatever, that portray them in such contrasting opposites. Like one is tyrannical, buffoonish, bloodthirsty tyrant, to this noble, righteous, God-fearing, chivalrous knight and stuff of the same guy. And they're coming from and then how are you supposed to find? And it almost comes to the point where when it comes to the character of historical figures, it's almost too difficult to figure out sometimes. Gosh.
Yes, and it's similar again. If we go back, this is as old as mankind. This idea of, again, some people will think one, and it's difficult to discern what is what sometimes, what is true, which one is the real Lionheart, if you will, or what is the real whatever, Yoshimitsu or whatever, Japanese ruler you're talking about, because again, morality changes. And actually Matt Easton, I'm mentioning Matt Easton a lot because I'm on a Schola Gladiatoria marathon at the moment. I've been watching loads of Bing watching, and he made a video on Vikings and morality.
See, I watched that as well. I watched that as well, and it was really interesting. And if you guys don't know, a really intriguing full-fledged reply video was made by History with Hilbert. And it goes for almost an hour long. And he raises some really intriguing points. Very respectful, really good guy. And I've already actually given a shout out to History with Hilbert. And he talks about, and he lists these pretty, reliable sources, seemingly, of the Anglo-Saxons doing very comparable things to the Brits, particularly taking slaves, and the Irish as well, and stuff. And that there wasn't necessarily what I gained from that. And Hilbert didn't say this explicitly in his video, but what I seem to garner from his video is that it seems like the way that the Vikings waged war was actually pretty much the same with how everyone waged war in that period. They just won more often. Seem to do it, be a bit better at it.
Interesting.
So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but what was?
No, not at all. Do you want? I actually don't see the chat. I don't know if there are questions or something we might want to.
Yeah, we are wrapping up, and so I'm actually in the analytics here, trying to find the super chats if they have.
No idea.
There seems to be. I can click on a super chat here. This is from Pent Jacko, and it says 100. So if this is 100. Thank you. That's very true. But he says, sadly, I can't think of a worthy question, but I do want to thank you guys for this amazing live show. Made my birthday 2 times better.
Grazie.
Oh, that is awesome. That is a pleasure. Thank you.
And a way to make your birthday even better is cooking pasta. Just saying. I had to say that.
So what's your favorite pasta, Sir Metatron?
Spaghetti.
And that's the way it said. Spaghetti.
Yeah. Spaghetti.
How did I go? Did I do it right?
Almost.
It's funny, like Australia, we love butchering other people's languages and cuisine and putting our own flavor on it and stuff. By the way, everyone, clearly we're kind of coming to the end of the live stream. We're starting to talk about food now. So I'll wrap up this part of it. So this has been a comparative discussion on chivalry and Bushido, and this has been awesome. Like, gosh.
Yeah, it was fun.
It has been great. And And so now just some casual, we can just, take it to a more casual notch. And I want to find the super chat because I feel I'm doing everyone a disservice for everyone who, did one that I can't do it. So I'll look for it. So while I look for it,
yes.
I'm sure people want to know a little bit more about you, Sir Metatron.
Me?
What is something that my viewers and perhaps even your viewers don't know about yourself?
Something that they don't know. Well, I would imagine there is plenty. I think they already know that I tend to have pasta for lunch and pizza for dinner. How stereotypical that is. Oh, maybe there is one thing. I have recently started to practice Katori Shintoryu, and I'm very happy with that. It's a style of Kenjutsu. Yeah, I've got the little thing now here. It's the Italian Association of Katori Shintoryu. I've started because some people were pointing out how, I have studied the samurai and I've studied history, and of course I speak the language, but I'm not very good when I do, martial art things. And I decided, it's about time to take time and learn the proper stances and how to properly hold a Japanese sword. So that is one of the things, one of the news, I would say.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so here is a super chat that I'll just bring up.
Yes.
This is by Anzi Kazumi, and it's 500 PHP, and I don't know what currency PHP is. So, but still, thank you. Whatever you donate in super chat.
Thank you.
Why is Metatron so handsome? So why are you so handsome, sir? Why?
It's probably because you need a new pair of glasses. But thank you.
It's because you're Italian. He's Italians. They're rugged good looks. And he also says, but what about dragons? The most important question.
Oh, yeah.
And the answer to that is dragons don't care about looks. They'll burn your face off anyway.
Indeed.
Kevin O'Neill asks, Metatron, when are you coming to the East Coast for decent pizza?
Now, I'll tell you, a lot of Italians can be really arrogant in terms of pizza. We are like, no, only our pizza is two pizza, any other pizza is disgusting. I don't agree with that. I've tried pizza in other countries. I've never tried pizza in the East. I'm sure I would enjoy it. I would still think Italian pizza is best, but I'm sure it's good. Good. Yeah.
My God, Australian pizza is an abomination, and I love it. Oh, I love it, Australian pizza. I found the super chats, which is awesome.
Yes. Nice
so I can go to some of the early ones. So Victor Eden asks, any chance of a new version of Cogent Roleplay? And so for those who don't know, and I'm pretty sure you don't know either, Cogent Roleplay is actually an RPG system that I developed with my brother, who is Jazza from the YouTube channel Draw with Jazza, if you guys are not aware of that. And so we made a thing that so any chance of a newer version of Cogent Roleplay? Not anytime soon, unfortunately. Both Jazz and myself have gotten really busy, and we just haven't been able to work on it. But what's your experience with tabletop pen and paper role-playing games? Because that's what Cogent is.
I've never mentioned this on my channel, but I love playing role-playing games in Dungeons and Dragons, and I started playing when I was 10, and I played for years. Okay, so I am a massive enthusiast as far as role-playing games are concerned. Love it.
Same. I love RPGs, but gee, it's been a while since I've been able to play. I mean, in fact, Tabletop Time. I haven't been able to play tabletop RPG since Tabletop Time, which is I played Cogent Roleplay on a separate YouTube channel that my brother made called Tabletop Time. So you can go, if you go, guys, look it up. You can go check it out. So we have a super chat here by Emilio.
Is he Italian?
Emilio Camacho Eris.
Oh gosh.
I'm sorry. €5. Both Bushido and Chivalry were good, but not every samurai and knight followed them truly. That's true. Yep. And in fact, we're able to explore that quite a lot.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Tensu Makadi. I think I should just pick a bad accent and try to I'll do it in a Scottish accent or something really bad. No, that's horrible. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I will never do that again. Anyway, Tensu Makadi says, Matriculations! Noble ones.
Noble ones. Yes.
Matriculations, noble ones. DVD Shaman, he had just donated $1. Thank you very much.
You.
And our €2 donation from Mad Number 4. Thank you. And last super chat for the live stream, which is a PHP of 125. I don't know what PHP is still. Thank you. And this is from Anzi Kazumi. Okay. This is for Shad. I plan on making a series using Cogent Roleplay and your fantasy rearmed ideas, and I hope to ask you for your blessing. You, my good friend, have my blessing. Absolutely. Go forward and make fantasy settings with giants and stuff and have fun and Cogent Roleplay. Well done. It's been great. And that is the last super chat. And so I found where they were. We're able to go through them. And
Good.
I have to say, gosh, Metatron, thank you for joining.
No. Thank you kindly.
This has been awesome. And
yeah, we should do this more often.
Oh, yeah. Like, I want to try and make this a more kind of regular thing because they're actually not that hard to do, but they're awesome. You get to, chat, interact and all that good stuff. And
yeah, you should come to my channel one day as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Next time I'll come over to your channel and we'll do that as well. And so we've had around 586 concurrent, viewers in this live stream, which has been awesome. Thank you for joining us, guys.
Thank you.
But alas, we need to bring it to a close, as heartbreaking and tragic as that is. Thank you for joining with us. Thank you for the Metatron. Metatron, is there anything that you would like to say as we was saying?
Yes, the Metatron has spread his wings.
And on that note,
but thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Oh, absolutely. So thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope to see you again. And until then, farewell.